I'm here today with Dr. Robyn Henderson-Espinoza. Dr. Robyn has always been a reluctant leader, knowing that collaboration and togetherness is a way forward, but society doesn't always value this. They are the founder of the the Activist Theology Project, a collaborative project committed to the collective work of social healing. Robyn makes her home in the land originally stewarded by Shawnee, Yuchi, and Cherokee people in what's now known as Nashville, Tennessee. Robyn is ordained in the Baptist tradition and seeks to live a life dedicated to prophetic imagination in all they do. Robyn is non-binary, transgender, queer, and Latinx, and relishes in the gray areas of life, knowing that the liminal spaces are spaces of possibility for a different world. Robyn has a PhD in theology and ethics from Iliff School of Theology and is the author of 2 books. Activist Theology was released in 2019, and their new book, Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation, was just released this week from Broadleaf Books. You can learn more about all of that at drRobynHenderson-Espinoza.com. So Robyn, it's so wonderful to speak with you again. It's great to catch up, and congratulations on all your great work.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I always, quite frankly, learn so much when I talk with you. And, I really appreciate, your intellect and all the things that you do. So,
Thank you.
Thanks for spending some time.
I'm having my coffee with you, so.
Well, so am I. So,
Great. It's coffee talk.
That's a necessity, at least for me in the morning.
Yeah, same.
So, you've got, quite a varied background. I mean, maybe you could tell folks a little bit more about that than what I just kind of briefly touched on.
Well, I tell people I'm a one-trick pony. I mean, I went to school to become a theologian, and now I find myself doing public scholarship and a whole bunch of public work, and that's not what I initially set out to do. That's one thing that people should know. And the other thing is I love writing. I always have, and I think that as much as we have to do activism and like get our hands dirty, we also have to think our way through struggle. And so that is really the gift that I bring, is helping people think through things, help people strategize by thinking, so that they can live out their theology. And we are all in process. The 2 books that I've written, they don't do everything, but I think they do something. And I think it takes a diversity of tactics to get free, and it does take a village. And I just watched the Hillsong documentary that dropped last week, and we should be very leery of the single narrative or the single story. And it's why all of my book events are in conversation with people this year. Because I think that we can learn so much by seeing conversation and hearing conversation instead of just listening to talking heads. I'm tired of talking heads.
Well, I got to talk with people like you all the time. So, I mean, I think it's great, but, so as you know, a lot of our audience are writers. So, and obviously from the books that you've written, you do think deeply as you write. So can you talk a little bit about how that process works for you?
Well, I do. I write in the genre, which is not really established, but it's emerging around politicized narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really memoir. It's politicized memoir. I call it politicized narrative. Our stories shape us, and stories often show us our values. And I think that when we begin to write our values, we are writing theology, because all theology is ethics. And when we are writing our values and sharing our stories, even those that are emergent, that can shape communities, that can shape people. And that, I think that's important work. We should not lose that. We should not lose track of sharing our stories with people, because that's how civilization, that's how communities emerged, is through the sharing of stories, through the passing on of traditions. Now, in some cases, we know that some traditions are passed down and are toxic and are harmful and have been weaponized against people. And we should know that history, like, why did the Nicene Creed, why was it established? Well, the emperor withheld food from the bishops meeting at the ecumenical council. So they had to make a decision on the creed. We should know that history.
Really? So, but talk a little bit more, if you could, about your writing process. I mean, do you dedicate like long periods of time, or do you like just take a little bit of time each day, or how does that work for you as you're trying to, kind of do deep thinking, so to speak?
Yeah, when I am writing, I do kind of have a rhythm of, I'll block out a whole day and on my calendar, and I will just kind of sit and be with my writing. And sometimes that is 2 hours, sometimes that is 4 hours, sometimes I'm in the bed with the laptop writing. But yeah, I'll clear out a day and really just give myself some time to think. And, I'm always reading. And I'm putting together the next project and trying to think through, okay, how do I bring public narrative and Renee Girard into this conversation? What will my process look like with that? How do I tell stories? So it's a lot of staring at my computer screen and like looking and seeing, okay, what do I do next? And then I'm a drafts person, so there's a lot of going back and reworking things, and again, clearing my day to give myself some time. But it's got to be in my head first before, it comes out on paper. Um, I tend to sit a lot of time like marinating in thought, and then it will come out on paper.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. So let's talk about the new book. The title, as I mentioned, Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation. What motivated that particular book for you?
I wanted to write on embodiment, and I wanted to write on my own story of becoming embodied. And then I had this like aha moment that embodiment could be a vision for democracy.
Yeah, well, I saw that. Tell people what you mean by that.
Well, that when we have a better relationship with our own bodies, we can have better relationship with other bodies, and those relationships can impact our cultural body or our democratic body. And it really is like we're all connected. It's an attempt to talk about the radical interconnectedness of all things. Like I tell my students, when you pull a thread here, you find that it's connected to the other end of the earth, of the world. And so I thought, oh, how can I write political theology as a story of embodiment? And so you have the book now of my attempt to do that.
Cool. So I'd like to read this endorsement from Dante Stewart. He says, Robyn Henderson-Espinoza has written a brave, intellectually astute, and artistic book in Body Becoming. In a time when so much of our theological exploration devalues the body and destroys it, Henderson-Espinoza takes seriously the word that we must have life, and life in its fullness. It is theory, it is poetry, it is love, it is witness. This book is more than a freedom journal or active theology. It's a prayer, a sermon, and a love note to so many people trying to get free. So wow, that says a lot right there.
Yeah.
um, and from knowing you, I'm not surprised about people viewing you as brave and intellectual. Um, but speak a little bit more about how you brought artistry into the book.
Um, well, I write a lot about images, and I write about this part of the book around my partner and I went to the lake in 2020. We had been at our home, during the height of the pandemic, and we went out into the lake and I got into the water, and I just kind of felt held
Hmm.
by the water, by this body. And I write about it very lyrically.
Hmm.
And so I bring a sort of lyricism to my writing. I love alliteration. I read a poem every day
Hmm.
as a way to broaden my own writing. Um, and and I had a great editor who really made this book come to life. I do sprinkle in some Spanish into the book, and so there's this artistry of images and lyricism, and some of it is poetic in a sense. I mean, a lot of what I do is kind of in the vein of theopoetics.
Hmm. Hmm.
Bringing together the rhythms of theology with theology itself. Um, so I mean, everything you do is art. That's what I'm told. And so this is my piece of art, and I'm very happy with it.
But for people like me that have an engineering and a business background, that's more foreign for us, but
Right,
it comes naturally for you.
right, right.
So in the book, you discuss another topic that I'm pretty unfamiliar with, somatics. Am I
Mhm.
pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah,
You talk about the healing power of somatics. So
yeah.
can you explain that a little bit for us?
So somatics is just the Greek word for body. Soma is the body in Greek, and somatics is a field of study where really is embodiment. And there's somatic psychology, there's somatic therapy. A lot of people are bringing embodiment into the healing arts. And so several years ago, I started attending a somatics class that my current partner was teaching. And it's slow functional movement, and it's designed to help you get into your body. And in the same way that
Hmm.
yoga is a somatic therapy.
Okay.
Um, and I think the way forward is through the body and through this fleshy material that we have. And so I write about how somatics can do the thing that we wanted to do. Like, so much of racism can be solved when we have an embodied awareness, if that makes
It gets
sense.
the whole democracy thing I think that you were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of
Exactly.
sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, personally, I have to admit that I kind of struggle
Hmm.
with, what you talk about in the book of connecting abstract intelligence of the mind with the body's intelligence. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, I treat them so separately.
Yeah. Well, and we all do, right? You're not alone. I mean, we have built entire worlds on the separation of body and mind. And I'm trying to say, let's they're in close proximity. Let's bring them back together, and let's figure out how we can lead through heart, because really what's separating body and mind is the heart of the matter.
Hmm.
And so if we can lead with heart, that's why I say to people, if you're ever in Nashville, let me know. Let's sit down and have a meal, because that embodied practice of sharing a meal is how we get free. It's not reading all the books. It's actually being in relationship with people.
I mean, that's hard to argue with.
Yeah.
I mean, through the centuries, I mean, the power of sharing meals has been,
Yeah.
well proven,
Right.
and clearly effective on multiple levels. In
Yeah.
our book about how to heal our divides, two of the different chapters were focused on organizations doing specifically that.
Right.
People's Supper and Dinner Church, both, were organized around trying to provide healing through meals.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, at the same time, I don't like my body for multiple reasons,
Right.
and I just as soon live in the world of the intellect as much as I can, just because it's more fascinating to me. I feel like I learn more,
Yeah.
But at the same time, I got to go over and exercise at the gym, even though I hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
So how can you help people like me who don't want to connect the two?
Yeah. I mean, I've been on a similar journey, I mean, there's a reason why I became a philosopher theologian. I like the mind. I like the life of the mind. And I'm learning that, I'm still learning to get into my body and learning to pay attention to my body. And I think that we could be a better society if we were all more aware of our rage, our anger, our sadness, our joy, our pain. Instead of silencing our pain, let's sit with our pain. And how do we transform our pain into healing?
But pain, is that mind or is that body? Or, I mean, obviously the answer is yes, but I mean,
yeah, exactly.
that's where intersect. I mean, it's certainly one of the most important places where it intersects.
Yeah.
This, right?
Yeah.
So what would be like the one thing that you would want people to take away from the book?
Oh, I'm so curious what people think about the book. I mean, gosh, that's a hard question. I've actually not thought about that question. The question I've been sitting with is my curiosity about what people will experience in the book. But if there's one thing that I want people to walk away from, it is this. You can read all the books on anti-racism, anti-violence, anti-oppression, but if you don't have an embodied awareness of those things, then we're still failing as a community. And so I think the one thing I want folks to come away with is the journey to get embodied, the journey to have embodied awareness and really be motivated to that end.
Yeah, we've all been given this thing to live in, right?
Yeah.
We call a body, and kind of randomly, right? I mean,
right.
where we happen to end up, but
yeah.
So at the beginning, I touched on some of the things that you do beyond just books. I mean, can you tell folks about your podcast and your Substack program and anything else that you got going on you want to share?
Yeah, so we do a podcast, and Reverend Anna Galladay and I co-host that, and that is a podcast where we take up pressing social concerns and try to connect the dots for people and through story. So another kind of politicized narrative podcast, and we're in our third season now.
Is that like once a week, or how often does that come out?
It's once a week, and they drop every Monday or Tuesday. I teach. I'm on faculty at Duke Divinity School. I also picked up a visiting post at McCormick Theological Seminary, so I'm teaching there. And I do write on Substack, and I write infrequently there, but I'm trying to get into like a once a week rhythm. And I on Substack, I just sort of write my thoughts. I do have a newsletter that I send out about once a month about, this is what's happening, this is where I'm going to be and whatnot. I mean, I just, I love your programs because, it's about writing for your life. And I feel like that's what I'm doing. I'm writing
Yeah,
for my life.
absolutely. Yeah, now you're a prime example of, what I was thinking about when I
Yeah.
pinpoint
And
that phrase.
we need more of that, because I think that's how we will heal the church. The church is so divided right now. And it's what, writing really can transform society.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
it needs to.
yeah.
We need more of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We really do.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier about, kind of future things you're working on. I mean, I know you're in the middle of a book launch now, but can you talk a little bit about where you're headed next?
Yeah. The next book is on belonging and freedom.
Hmm.
And I'll be adding in some elements of um, the French social theorist Rene Girard. Be working in some of his stuff. I'm gonna see if Luke Burgess will maybe contribute to the book. He wrote a really good book, sort of Girardian book called Wanting. And so we've been in conversation. So I'm going to see maybe if he'll write the foreword or something like that. Um, and yeah, it's on belonging and freedom with some Girard and some public narrative. And it'll be another book that will draw from stories of my life, but also connect it with theory that I've translated into story. So another sort of politicized narrative theology book. And we'll see, we'll see who picks it up or if it gets picked up.
So early stage still.
Yeah, early stage. Yeah.
Good. Well, I mean, that's completely understandable. I mean, you put a ton of work to get the current book to where it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a great appreciation now for how much it takes to meet and launch a book.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a full-time job.
So again, the new book is titled Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation, and it was just released from Broadleaf Books. And you can learn more at drRobynHenderson-Espinoza.com. So
Yes.
Robyn, thanks so much for joining us. Always such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always great to talk with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again.
Okay. Yep.